in a certain area are voted down. Or let me rephrase that, or the vote shows that they do not close. Can I address, I think I can because Ms. Martinez addressed it. So if there is a cascading effect and we go ahead and vote at some point on the boundary issues aside from the closures, does that enable you to take our vote and do any adjustments you would need to do and bring that back to us at a later time, Dr. Smith?
Yeah, so my thought process on that would be it would take at least a couple of weeks for me to visit with Zonda, make assessments through their geocoding process based on whatever decision is made tonight, and map out the cascading impact that would have. Because there are a lot of nuances there in terms of where the students would go, what the utilization rate is, a potential campus where they would go. So once we have clarity on whatever's going to happen tonight, and if we were to select individual schools and make adjustments, I would say to the board that it would take at least a couple of weeks to be able to process, understand, again, go through the geocoding process and then see what the impact and bring those scenarios back to the trustees so that you all can have an understanding of the impact and have the data you need to make a decision.
Okay, but per policy, we would still be able to vote on the boundary changes, and anything that wasn't impacted with the cascading effect would still be applicable, and anything that did, you would bring that back to us.
So, and I'm going to ask Mr. Brush to address the legalities and the policy aspect of it as well, Dr. Smith, if that's okay. Absolutely. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Certainly. So if the board were to disaggregate the motion and vote on schools individually and reject the proposed closure of any one school, to the extent it impacts the proposed boundaries, the administration would have to reinitiate the process under policy FC local, work through the proposed boundaries, and present, after going through the process as outlined in policy, following each step in the policy, present a new plan to the board for the board's consideration. The administration can't make a unilateral change. Any change must be approved by the board, and the administration would be obligated to follow all steps in policy FC local.
No, that is all. I just wanted to be reassured, and so that the trustees understand that it would be feasible still for, even though Dr. Smith clearly says he needs time, which I would hope he would take some time to address any cascading impacts that a vote to keep a school open, would produce.
All right, thank you. Ms. Charania.
Sorry, so I just wanted to understand, based on what Mr. Brush just said and what Trustee Hannans just said. So if we do remove schools out, we're going back to the drawing board again on the southeast side all over again. So this would not be implemented for the entire southeast piece.
If they're removed out and voted to not be closed. So both things have to happen. So the motion to amend might remove it out if it passes, but then we will vote separately on whatever school is moved out, whether or not we're going to close that school. So it would, if Ms. Hannon's amendment passes, we are removing Austin Parkway from the original motion, and then we will take a separate vote on Austin Parkway whether or not to close that school. There will still be a vote on whether or not to close it, but it'll lead to two separate votes. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Okay, and just one more question. So if the vote passes not to close a school, what does it mean for the rest of it? Like, would we still be implementing the other closures in the new school year? Like, how would that cascading work?
I think to Attorney Brush's point, we would have to go back to the drawing board, and we would have to start the process over and stay consistent with the board's policy.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to clarify, is if we vote not to close 1 or 2 or whatever number of schools, then we have to go back, we're going back to the drawing board. It's not going to get implemented in the next coming school year, yes?
To the extent that a decision not to close a school impacts other aspects of the boundary plan, then the administration will have to take a new look at the boundary plan that's impacted. So for instance, if the board were to vote to not close one school but close another, to the extent that the closed school's boundary plan could be implemented and the board otherwise voted for the boundary plan, that would be a final board action.
Okay, sorry, I need some clarity.
Can I say it a different way?
Oh, well, I have a question again. So say, for example, we're not closing AP, we vote not to close it, right? We were cascading students, AP was going to one other school, those kids were being cascaded somewhere else. What happens to the whole cascading effect? Do those students still move over, even though AP kids are not moving over? I'm confused. It's all intertwined.
It is all intertwined, so that is my point, that we're not able to really determine that today. We would have to assess the impact, but yes, the students that were, to your example, if we closed Austin Parkway, there were students that were going to be moved to Sellers Way and Butcher, right? Well, if we don't close Austin Parkway, then we would have to have a detailed look at things to see what impact that would have on Settlers Way, Colony Bend, Butcher, and the other campuses that were a part of that.
Yeah.
So it is a very complex set of scenarios.
In a way, it's dead in the water, almost. I would say, like, we're going back to the drawing board, because it is very intertwined. I
Yes.
just don't see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Charania. Ms. Hannon.
I just want to offer my understanding, and I think Mr. Brush was trying to say this. So any campus that is, because my intention was to make multiple amendments for each of the 7 schools. And for any school who was voted to close, the item, the recommendation for that pattern, that closure pattern, would still proceed, correct? Yes. So let's use Austin Parkway as the example, since that's what you're using. So if Austin Parkway is voted to close, those boundary recommendations would proceed. So the closure and the boundary proceed. But let's say Glover does not close, then they would have to look at that feeder pattern. But I want to clarify with Dr. Smith, if you're saying that it has to be like tabula rasa, clean slate, and we wipe it down and we start from scratch, that is not my intention. Because if I approve, then the boundary changes as presented in here, what my vote would represent is, although there may be a closure that I vote for, and it may pass or may not, but I agree with the remaining boundary recommendations you've made. What I'm not, if the boundary changes then gets its own vote, we wouldn't be saying we want you to start from scratch. We would want you to say we want you to look at the boundary impacts of the schools that were up for closure but were voted to remain open.
So the board would have to clarify for me, and along, I guess, with Mr. Brush, how we would handle our policy that's governing the process, because that's where I'm defaulting back to. We have a policy. The policy drives the process. We follow that policy, which has led to the recommendations that are before us this evening. In my view, if we want to do anything different, if you all decide to do anything different, I have to look to you all, because for me, I'm going to default back to the policy. That's the safe place for me to be able to guide our next step. So if you all want to do something different, I think that's a conversation we have to have, but the policy piece has to be the center point of that conversation.
Thank you. Ms. Helliger.
Just for clarity, if we vote, the amendment on the table is to vote to take APE out of the whole boundary, this particular boundary grouping. We would not know then how it would impact if we voted yes to keep them open, or whichever what is yes or no, how we vote to keep them open, then we don't know how it's going to impact the rest of the boundary group. We don't know how it's going to cascade. So to me, so it sounds as if the strength of the recommendation is now weakened by separating these things, because now we don't know the full impact on budget, programming, all that, right? Okay.
Yes, and just to clarify, the reason why we wouldn't know that information in real time is because there's a geocoding process that Zonda utilizes to map out by address where the students go. And so obviously, absent of being able to do that in real time, we can't be real specific about that, which is why I alluded to if we did something different, it would take at least a couple of weeks to be able to process and understand what the changes are, give me an opportunity to work with Zonda to see what impact that would have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Charania.
All right, just adding on to what Trustee Helliger just said, I was flipping through a bunch of these pages here. Really, the only clean scenario is Glover, which closing that just divides into two other schools. Everything else, every other school has a cascading effect. And I think Dulles may be the other one, but every other school where they're receiving students, they're pushing out students to a different school to accommodate that school closure. So it's all intertwined. Yeah. I don't see it happening for the 26th school year, to be honest, because that's how intertwined the whole thing is on the southeast side.
Thank you, Ms. Charania. Ms. Worsbicky.
Correct me if I'm wrong, President Tessan, but right now we're just making the motion to separate it. And then everyone can vote no or yes on Austin Parkway.
That's correct. That's what I said.
Thank you. And then we can have discussion after this.
Well, but we're discussing right now whether it is right, the right thing to do, or whether we should be pulling it out at all. That's the crux of the conversation right now. That's why they're having that conversation.
Yes, I see that, but I also think that that's part of
School closure is separate and apart from whether or not we should be pulling this school off of the original motion. That's
Right.
why the conversation is whether we should be pulling schools off of the original motion
okay.
and the impact of that. Okay. Okay, so we are now going to vote on the motion to amend, and this will just be, if you vote yes, then you are voting to remove Austin Parkway from the original motion. You're not voting to leave open or close the school, just whether or not to remove it from the original motion for a separate vote on closure. Okay, please vote. All right, motion passes 4-2. 5-2, sorry. Okay, so now the original motion is as presented with the exclusion of Austin Parkway Elementary. And the second motion will be Austin Parkway Elementary separately for closure.
And to, I'm sorry. May I ask a
Yes, Ms.
clarifying
Hannah.
question? So if I want to make multiple amendments, should I make them at this,
Well,
at this point?
what I'm going to do is I'm going to have us vote first on Austin Parkway Elementary separately, and then I will go back to the original motion, and you can make another amendment.
Okay.
Okay? All right. So now may I have a motion for Austin Parkway Elementary? For the closure and the boundary changes that go along with that.
So Ms. Tossan, may I instead, or I'm going to look to Mr. Brush, may I instead make the motion solely about the decision on Austin Parkway, and then following all of my series of amendments for closure, make one full motion amendment to accept boundary changes?
I think all the boundary changes impact the closures.
So the current motion that's been passed separates out Austin Parkway in consideration of the Austin Parkway closure. What that leaves in the main motion as amended currently are the boundary changes and the other 3 schools.
Okay.
So what we'll do is we'll vote on Austin Parkway, and then if you'd like to make other amendments to remove the schools, we can do that one at a time, and the only thing remaining will be the boundary change, the additional boundary changes.
Okay, may I make those motions to amend now?
No, we're going to vote first on Austin Parkway Elementary, and then we'll go back to the original motion. So what I need
so
is a motion related to the Austin Parkway Elementary school closure and boundaries related to that.
Okay, but Ms. Tossan, the original motion still includes Dulles Elementary, Glover Elementary, and Ridgegate Elementary.
I understand. So what we're going to do is we're going to vote on Austin Parkway first, and then when we go back to the original motion, you can make your next motion to amend.
Mr. Brush, is that correct?
I think it's a permissible approach because it leaves the main motion intact.
The main motion is still intact, and you can make another motion to amend before we vote on that motion. So may I have a motion for the Austin Parkway Elementary closure and corresponding boundary changes?
I move for the board to accept the motion for the Southeast Central attendance boundary with the removal.
No.
Mr. Brush, can you help me with language for the motion?
As I appreciate the motion, the process that President Tassan has laid out, she's looking for a motion specific to Austin Parkway, such as I move that the board approve the recommendation to close Austin Parkway Elementary School.
Correct.
Okay. I don't need to withdraw the one I just started.
No, because it did not receive a
Okay,
second.
so I make the motion to remove Austin Parkway Elementary from the original motion.
No.
That's still not it.
No. So
Austin Parkway has already been removed from the main motion.
can you make the motion, Addie? Can you make
I move that we close Austin Parkway Elementary School
as recommended?
as recommended.
Okay.
We have a motion by Ms. Helliger and a second by Dr. Gilliam. Do we have discussion? So this motion is strictly on the closure of Austin Parkway Elementary and the boundary changes that will go along with that. A yes is to close and a no is to not close. Okay, Ms. Hannon, did you have discussion?
No.
Does anyone else have discussion? Ms. Charania? You're not on.
Yeah, okay, I'm on. So if we vote not to close it, it's going to impact cascading effects. Yes? Yes? I just want to make sure. Okay, all right, thank you. that was my only clarification.
And then once we vote on Austin Parkway, we will go back to the original motion, and if there are additional amendments that are desired, we will take up those amendments at that time. Everybody understand? Are there any questions on the process?
Ms. Tessan, could you just state it again? If you vote yes,
You are closing the school.
if you vote no, you're keeping it up.
You
Okay,
are
thank
keeping
you.
it open. All right. Ms. Charania, did you have something else? No. Okay. Okay, please vote. Yes is to close. Motion passes 4-3. We go back to the original motion, which now includes closure of Dulles Elementary, Glover Elementary, and Ridgegate Elementary, and the other boundary changes.
You don't need the original motion restated.
not. I just need to
Okay,
know
for
if you
my
wanna-
next amendment, I move to amend the motion to remove the proposed closure of Dulles Elementary from the motion so that the board votes on the proposed closure in a separate vote.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Hannon and a second by Ms. Worsbicky. So this is related to the removal of Dulles Elementary School from the original motion and for a separate motion on the closure of Dulles Elementary. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. A yes is to remove it and separate it out, and a no is to not. No, it's not about closing, it's just about removing it right now. It's just about removing it from the motion. Motion fails 4-3. We are back to the original motion, which has all the same schools in it, except, of course, Austin Parkway.
Okay, for my next amendment, I move to amend the motion to remove the proposed closure of Glover Elementary from the motion so the board votes on the proposed closure.
Are you on? Is your mic on?
I'm sorry. For my next amendment, I move to amend the motion to remove the proposed closure of Glover Elementary from the motion so that the board votes on proposed closure in a separate vote.
We have no
I
second.
second.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Hannon and a second by Mr. Schoaf. Do we have discussion? All right, please vote. You are voting to remove Glover from the original motion, not on closure, just to remove it from the original motion. A yes is to remove, a no is to not remove. Please vote. Motion fails 4-3. We are back to the original motion, which has all schools in it except Austin Parkway Elementary.
Okay, for this amendment, I move to amend the motion to remove the proposed closure of Ridgegate Elementary from the motion so the board votes on the proposed closure in a separate vote.
I second it.
We have a motion by Ms. Hannon and a second by Ms. Worsbicky. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. A yes is to remove Ridgegate from the original motion. A no is to leave Ridgegate in the original motion. Please vote. Motion fails 4-3. All right, we are back to the original motion, which has all schools except Austin Parkway Elementary. Do we have discussion on this motion?
I call for the vote.
Okay, please vote. This is the original motion, which is to close all schools with the exception of Austin Parkway because it was pulled out, and for the boundary changes in the South Central Elementary attendance boundary.
Oh, would you please restate what we're voting on?
You are voting on the original motion, which is the Southeast Central Elementary attendance boundaries, including school closures for Dulles Elementary, Glover Elementary, and Ridgegate Elementary. Austin Parkway was already voted on, so it's out. Just the remaining schools. Motion passes 4-3. All right, next up is item 4D. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the Northwest Central Elementary attendance boundaries, including school closures for Arizona Fleming Elementary, Mission West Elementary, and Sugar Mill Elementary as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Gilliam and a second by Ms. Helliger. Do we have discussion? Ms. Charania?
I'd like to make an amendment. Yes? Okay. I move to amend the motion to remove the boundary changes.
Item 4D. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the Northwest Central Elementary attendance boundaries, including school closures for Arizona Fleming Elementary, Mission West Elementary, and Sugar Mill Elementary as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Gilliam and a second by Ms. Helliger. Do we have discussion? Ms. Charania?
I'd like to make an amendment. Yes? Okay. I move to amend the motion to remove the boundary changes from the motion so that they can be voted on separately for Neal Elementary, Pecan Grove Elementary, Malala Elementary, Madden Elementary, Seguin Elementary, and Jordan Elementary.
I second that.
Please list the schools again for me.
Neal Elementary, Pecan Grove Elementary, Malala Elementary, Madden Elementary, Seguin Elementary, and Jordan Elementary.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Charania and a second by Ms. Worsbicky. Do we have discussion on the motion to amend? Ms. Charania?
Yeah. So the reason why I removed these is because their removal doesn't impact the 3 school closures that are in the Northwest Central scenario, nor does it have an effect on the cascading for the closures that are there. So I'll speak we're just talking about the amendment right now, right? We're voting on the
Just
amendment.
on the amendment right now. So this is just related to removal from the original motion and why that you might have asked for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we're going to vote on the amendment. A yes vote removes the boundaries for Neal, Pecan Grove, Malala, Madden, Seguin, and Jordan from the original motion to be voted on separately. A no vote keeps all of these boundaries in the original motion. Got it? All right, please vote. No. Motion passes 5-2. Okay, so now we are going to vote on those boundaries before we go back to the original motion. So just on those boundaries. So may I have a motion to vote separately on those boundaries? To approve them as presented, as recommended.
So does that impact the other closures unless I add to the amendment?
Presently, the closures remain in the main motion and would be voted on with the main motion.
Right. You can add your amendment after. If there are other schools you want to pull out, as you did previously, after we vote on these boundaries, then you can pull those school closures out from the original motion.
Okay, is that correct?
Correct. Currently, only the boundaries from the selected 6 schools are on the table for the board's vote. And so what can be revisited in the main motion is the 3 proposed school closures and I believe the 2 remaining school boundaries.
I move that we approve the boundary recommendations for Neal, Pecan Grove, Malala, Madden, Seguin, and Jordan,
As presented.
as presented.
I'm seconding it.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Helliger and a second by Ms. Charania. Do we have discussion on those boundaries? Ms. Charania.
Okay. So pulling these out does not impact the 3 school closures or the cascading effect of those because, so I wanted to make that clear that it does not impact those. Just specific to these 6 schools, I just wanted to highlight and point out that when we looked at these boundaries, we looked at it specifically for the overcrowding for the schools for Neal, and I believe it was Seguin, which Neal isn't cap and flow and Seguin was overcrowded. That's why we were looking at it was mainly to rebalance on that side. So when we had looked at it, the PASA data, the most updated PASA data had not been released, and we got that sometime in December, January, and that data showed more of a decline in that northwest area at almost all of the schools except for 3. I think it was Neal and Seguin and Patterson were the ones that didn't show a decline. Everything else in that area showed a decline. So with the Madden move to Mission Glen, when we moved Madden to Mission Glen, Malala, if we continue with this vote of rebalancing that area, Malala will remain over capacity for at least 1 school year, if not more, because we know it's 1 for sure. So the 246 Madden students are entirely displaced out of the community to a new elementary school without knowing, since we haven't done the high school and the middle school boundaries, of where they're going to land in. So yes, we don't look at it as a neighborhood. It is one large development like Sienna, like Riverstone, Telfair, and this is one large development. So out of this entire development, these 246 students are going to be displaced, not knowing which middle and high school they're going to go to. Are they going to come back, with that cohort back to the middle and high school? We done that similarly when Riverstone was in Austin Parkway, but Riverstone kids knew that they were going to come back to First Colony, would come back to Elkins. So, but that is not the case here because we haven't done those other 2 boundaries. So if you look on page 8 and I have a lot of pages, a lot of that is more supporting numbers than anything else. So if you look on page 8, so even with, if we moved forward with these boundary changes and rebalancing that area, Holly will still start the new year, like this 26-27 school year, being at 66%, and it's going to continue declining. Pecan Grove also continues to decline, and Oakland in 2 years from now will also be declining. But these were not numbers that were presented when we had first looked at that corridor. And I think with these new numbers, it warrants us relooking at it. And Malala and Madden, even with this rebalance in 2031, are going to be at 81%, where they're much higher in the 90s right now. And so page 9 has the updated PASA data without the boundary changes. So if we don't move forward with it, which shows that we probably would have adjusted this differently because Oakland is showing a decline, Pecan Grove, Holly, all of those, Madden is showing a decline starting this school year at 79%. But we didn't have that data when we made these decisions then, or we decided on which option, or even SBAC decided which option to go with. And then on page 6, if you go to page 6, which has the map for Malala, Neal, Madden, Pecan Grove, we can see that we have the Neal community there, which is coming from the north of 99. They're crossing over 99 to come to Neal, but then at the same time, we're pushing the existing Neal community today to move over on the other side of 99. So it's like we're almost doing this 2 times to accommodate without looking at that PASA data again and seeing where the decline is. In the current year, this current year in 25-26, Neal is at 100% with cap and flow, with 56 kids going to Oakland and 61 kids at Pecan Grove, from what Ms. Martinez had shared in one of the calls that we had, which is a total of 117 Neil zone students that are currently in cap and flow. So when we're moving these 237 Neil students to Malala, we're only really solving for 120 students, really like that additional number, which we don't have today as it is, right? So, but instead we're impacting the ones we do have, which is 821 students between the 237 Neil students moving to Malala, the 338 Malala students moving to Madden, and the 246 Madden students moving to Holly. So I just feel like we're solving for 120 students, which we don't have right now, but we're impacting an additional number of students that we currently do have. And Neil and Seguin both have a staffing model in place to manage the overcapacity today, versus if we move forward with this rebalancing, Neil and Seguin and Malala, all three will have to change their current staffing models. Malala for the overcapacity that's taking in from Neil, and then Neil and Seguin for the reductions, which is why my recommendation was to keep currently, right now, to keep it at status quo and keep the cap and flow, and then re-review the boundaries, and then re-review the boundaries for the remaining schools when we do the middle school and the high school. So I'm not saying we don't do anything. I'm saying let's look at it when we do the middle and high school boundaries, and we look at this, like these schools that we've taken out at that time.
So, Madam President, that and Trustee Sharania, that's a lot to unpack right now in the moment. And in all fairness, we received the information that you shared with us just today, and we did a brief cursory review of it. So I'm not suggesting that we have command of all the details of it, but we did speak to some concerns that we think are valid to stress. And so I'm going to ask Pyle and Beth to speak to those concerns.
Sure, thank you. And again, so the first, a couple things in no particular order. I do
Ms.
wanna-
Martinez, I'm going to ask you to speak into your, it's just hard for us to hear.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So just a couple of things that come to mind initially. So since that data was shared last week about the cap and overflow at Pecan Grove, we've gained one more at Pecan Grove and one more at Oakland. It's important to note the Pecan Grove area specifically is an area of development, and so we expect to see more growth in that area that is capping and overflowing from Neal to Pecan Grove. Then the other thing I do want to point out with regard in this alternative possibility is that for Seguin and Jordan, there is an impact. Seguin is going to be over 108. It's at 111% currently, 108%, and pretty steady up until about, well, at the end of the 5 years, it's at 111. So it continues to increase. So that is an area that does need attention in terms of relieving that overutilization, and that was intended to better utilize Jordan, which has a lower utilization score. And I think first and foremost, really should have said it out of the gate, is that we did receive the updated PASA numbers in December, and so the work of the committee in January and February included the new PASA projected enrollment over the next 10 years, but we focused on the next 3 to 5 years on the plans that were brought forward.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Trania, Ms. Martinez. Ms. Worsbicky.
Just to clarify and confirm, if this motion passes, the cap and flow will still be in place for Neal? Okay. Yes.
Yes, ma'am, with no alternative, it would need to remain in place.
Okay, I also just wanted to mention something. I think Trustee Trania made several good points. My actual also concern because of the PASA data, but also because of Madden being moved to Mission Glen this year, I would really like us to look at that specifically when we go, if this passes, to remove all of them, but looking at Madden specifically, when in the next year. They're going to be at Mission Glen for a year and a half, 2 years. I don't really feel like there is a rush to have them rezoned this year and make it, the data was wrong to begin with, so let's look at the right data again whenever it comes out again in December again from PASA. That's all I want to say about that.
Thank you. Ms. Helliger.
I think she answered my question because I was concerned whether or not, we were looking at the right data, especially after it came out in December and you're saying it did. And I want to look at the SBAC. I see them here. Do you feel like you got that right answer? Did you use that data? Okay, so I see multiple different answers over there. So I'm not sure what's happening. So based on, I wish we had this earlier because, without the boundary change, we're still operating these schools, especially Neal, at such a high capacity. And that is a concern of mine. That's a major concern of mine. And then now we also operate in Holly at such a low capacity at, almost at 34% in looking at this 5-year trend. We have to put the kids into this school, or this might be another school, that we put up for removal or closing.
Are you referring to Trustee Sharania's information?
Yes.
Because that's not from the district.
Okay.
That's from Ms. Sharania. And we, as I was stating, we just got it today, and we hadn't really had time to really process it. We did a cursory look over it today. So,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
But also, there were some points that we stressed today in our meeting that were points of concern, and I think is valid for the trustees to know, and I want Pyle and Beth to be able to share those and speak to those, just for information purposes.
So we were talking about the PASA data that we received in December. So I wanted to bring a point of clarification that every step of this process has been multiple layers of review. And so when we received the updated PASA information, PASA actually came to present to the Board of Trustees, and we shared that with our SBAC as well. And so Zonda then looked at that information to see how did those boundary plans, the draft boundary plans that we had, how did they align with the updated projections? And so they spent the winter break doing that work, and then we re-engaged with the SBAC in early January 7th. And so the SBAC had an opportunity to look at the data. There was table talk, they engaged in dialogue, and they were able to see what may have changed. And the one piece that did change with the PASA information was looking at Patterson. And so the growth there was not as anticipated. And so what Zonda ended up doing is saying that instead of moving students out of Patterson, we're going to keep them remaining at Patterson. And so we shared that information with the SBAC in January, and then we re-engaged with them in February as well to talk about what the community information and the feedback was from our survey. And so there was opportunity, and so I just wanted to bring that point of clarification that we weren't looking at incorrect information. We wanted to ensure that the SBAC, every moment we had with updated information, we wanted to bring it forward to them so that they were able to look at this information with that updated piece.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hannon.
I'm sorry,
You're not on.
turn it off. I was just making clear
Okay.
that this.
You're not on.
Sorry, I was just making clear that this was not from the district. It was from Trustee Sharania, and that was clarified. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Brzezicki.
Can you, Beth and Pyle, can you clarify how many SBAC members were at the January and February meetings? And if they were the ones that were out of that, 15 to 20 that were consistent members? Because, and I say this because this is part of just my whole reasoning. I have 10 different points I didn't have to say at the last vote, apparently. But one of them is that although I completely value the SBAC's time and efforts, and their willingness to serve our district, we also need to recognize there were some structural limitations with the process, and many members were not at meetings. They changed throughout the year because we had vacancies that we even voted on here at the board level. And so with the magnitude and long-term impact of the decisions of closing schools, and with this one is specifically rezoning. I'm just concerned that we didn't have consistent and fully representative participation, and that's why I asked that.
Thank you for bringing that up. So on January 7th, we had 20 SBAC members in attendance, and February the 5th, we had 19. And so on average, that was the average number of SBAC members we had throughout the process, was about 20.
Were they the same members?
They were not the same each time. They were representative of every feeder pattern, with the exception on January 7th, we did not have representation from Willow Ridge. And those members were also surveyed an additional time in February, so that the additional layer of review, after they looked at the public survey results, they were asked a question in the February 5th meeting of whether or not that information changed their thinking, and they received a virtual survey for final feedback to bring forward for our recommendations, and those were the same individuals that received that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you also, for members who were not able to make the meetings in person, you had subsequent updates for those members who were not there, correct?
There were 2 opportunities after each meeting, a makeup session and a lunch and learn session.
Okay. So I don't think that we should, I don't see structural limitations to the SBAC. I think the SBAC follows policy. Every member is given every opportunity to attend in person. They are given every opportunity to get updates if they cannot attend in person, and they were given every opportunity to provide a vote or feedback or comment. And I think I've heard from SBAC members personally that that is the case, that they felt like the process was carried out with fidelity. So I don't want to knock the SBAC process, because I think I appreciate the work that was done by those members, and not just showing up, but in delving into that information and understanding it inside and out. And I also think it's important to note that we did have that data. That data was presented to us, the updated PASA data. It was also presented to the SBAC. And I hesitate to, at this stage in the process, to start questioning things like that. I mean, one SBAC member cannot unilaterally take away the work that was done and the recommendation that was made. And I mean, the same goes for us up here as trustees. We have been engaged every step of the way in this process. We have given feedback. We have given our opinions on what we think should happen or shouldn't happen, and that's for a year, since day one. The SBAC has also provided that feedback. And so I'm hesitant to, at this point, suddenly be presented with a new scenario that has not been vetted by the SBAC, by the trustees, by Zonda, by the administration, by the community. And so that concerns me a great deal, that we're here kind of getting this in the moment. So those are Ms. Hannah, did you have one more thing before we vote?
Yes, and I'm sorry, and because my question doesn't necessarily pertain specifically to the motion on the table, but my question is, I'm actually not sure when I can share some remarks that aren't specific to this item, because
When we go back to the original motion.
when we go back to the original
Yes.
motion after I
Yes.
then do my amendments. Thank you for
Yes,
the
exactly.
clarification. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Trania?
I just wanted to say that when we first looked at this data, it was September, I believe, right? At that time, there were 5 options presented in that first round. There was one option that was presented that didn't move these kids, like breaking up this entire development and it did it more counterclockwise versus anti-clockwise, which is what we're doing right now. At that time, we looked at that plan, but we couldn't do anything with it because the PASA data wasn't there. And when the PASA data was shared, one of the comments I had been making again and again was, can we revisit this? Because there was no further option presented in light of the new data that came out that showed that there was a decline in this area, that showed that there was not a need to go ahead and move these kids out. Because right now we have Seguin that's overcrowded, yes. Right now we have Neil that is at 100% at cap and flow, because Seguin is right now at 111%, but it's declining as well, right, to 108 this coming school year. Neil is going to continue to grow because obviously that, like, all of that area is zoned there versus anywhere else. So that's why they're in cap and flow. So we've got two areas there, two schools there that are 100% or over 100%, versus now when we move forward with this plan, we're going to have Malala that's going to be well over 120%, like at one school, because we can't move those kids into Madden. So yes, the trade-off is 2 versus 1, but those two schools already have a model in place right now, which we're going to now change it at 3 schools. I just think that in light of the new data and knowing that this doesn't affect any of the school closure cascades, I think it warrants another visit again in the next SBAC.
So, Beth and Paul, I don't want to put you on the spot, of course, but do you have the PASA data in front of you? Because from the top of my head, I don't think the PASA data was very different. But do you have it in front of you so that you could speak
Yes, sir.
to it? Okay. Can you do that, please, for clarification?
Sure. So when you look at, I'm looking at the PASA data in the boundary recommendations that you are currently looking at. So in not the original PASA data that came through in our current, as of today, boundary. And so when you look at those changes, there will be an impact at Malala as they host, if we follow through with this recommendation, as they host the students who are moving out of Neal and into Malala. We call that the host year, or as long as it takes for Madden to be repaired. And then not moving students from Malala to Madden, they would be at 120% with additional portables as they host those additional students. In the next year, when they move out, or let's just go with the 26-27, if we followed through on the boundaries straight to Madden and straight from Neal to Malala, it would be at 91%. So when we're able to return back to Madden, we would be looking at Malala at 92%, 86%, 83%, and 81% over the next 5 years. At Madden, that would be at 92%, 90%, 86%, 87%, and then back up to 91%. That's in this current recommendation. And what's the other one we're looking at? Holly without programs is at 66, 61, 56%. Again, that's without programs. We have a bilingual program there, and so that populates or utilizes that school to a greater extent.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything else? Okay. All right, so we're going to vote now. And this vote is strictly on the boundaries for Neal, Pecan Grove, Malala, Madden, Seguin, and Jordan. A yes supports the administration's recommendation, and a no does not. Please vote. Motion passes 4-3. All right, we are back to our original motion, which has the boundaries, the school closures for Arizona Fleming, Mission West, and Sugar Mill, and any boundaries other than those that we just voted on for Neal, Pecan Grove, Malala, Madden, Seguin, and Jordan.
Yes, President Tesson, I move to amend the motion to remove the proposed closure of Arizona Fleming from the motion, so the board votes on proposed closures in a separate vote.
I second.
We have a motion by Ms. Hannon and a second by Ms. Worsbicky. This motion is to remove Arizona Fleming from the original motion for closure and for a separate vote. So this is just for removal. Yes removes it from the original motion. No keeps it in the original motion. Please vote. Motion fails 4-3. We are back to the original motion, which has all 3 school closures.
Yes, I move to amend the motion to remove the proposed closure of Mission West Elementary from the motion, so the board votes on the proposed closure in a separate vote.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Hannon and a second by Ms. Helliger. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. A yes removes Mission West from the original motion and keeps it for separate vote. A no leaves it in the original motion. Motion fails 4-3.
My final amendment, I move to amend the motion to remove the proposed closure of Sugar Mill Elementary from the motion, so the board votes on the proposed closure in a separate vote.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Hannon and a second by Ms. Helliger. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. A yes removes Sugar Mill from the original motion, and a no leaves it in the original motion. A yes removes Sugar Mill from the original motion and keeps it for a separate vote, and a no leaves it in the original motion. Motion passes 4-3. We will now vote separately on Sugar Mill closure. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move that we take the recommendations from the district to close Sugar Mill Elementary School as presented.
We have a motion by Ms. Helliger and a second by Dr. Gilliam. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. A yes closes Sugar Mill. A no leaves Sugar Mill open. Motion passes 4-3. We are back to the original motion, which has the closures of Arizona Fleming Elementary and Mission West Elementary.
Ms. Tossan, is this our final vote
Yes.
on this item?
Do you have, go ahead, Ms. Hannon.
I would like to make some comments. This has been a hard process for this board, this community, our staff, and I want everybody to know that. And so you're going to have to bear with me because I have something I'm going to read. So the greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss, but that our aim is too low and we reach it. I am not sure who offered this quote to the world, but it is how I feel and how I have felt as I am faced with the decisions to close schools. Fort Bend ISD provides one of the most significant and life-impacting public services for children and their parents in our community. Moms and dads and caregivers from Missouri City, Sugar Land, Meadows Place, and portions of Stafford, Richmond, Fresno, and Arcola and Houston send us their children in hopes we aim high so their children might do the same. We are facing a crossroads tonight. Over the past few months, the closures and boundary changes have been our focus. We have also recently learned more about the district's efforts to promote school choice. I am optimistic about our newly created elementary Spanish dual language program and Chinese immersion program, the virtual high school program for freshmen, and the district's goal to make it a standalone program is another promising strategy to promote choice and bring new students into our school district. The possibility of broader transfer policies will enable parents to bring students into Fort Bend and move them within Fort Bend is also a promising way of recruiting and retaining students to provide them with outstanding educational opportunities. At the last meeting, a trustee reminded us our job is to hold the superintendent accountable. One of the most important oversight responsibilities a trustee has is to hold the superintendent accountable for maximizing student academic achievement and performance through strategic leadership. Another key responsibility is to ensure that the superintendent is effectively managing the budget. In this day and age, I know those are both tied so closely together and harder than ever. I would like this board and the superintendent to aim higher by creating attainable goals that focus on bringing students back who have left Fort Bend ISD and to develop goals focusing on keeping our wonderful students in Fort Bend ISD. I am not naive to the fact that we have aging campuses, aging neighborhoods, lower birth rates, a neighboring hyper-growth district of forecasted budget deficits, and charter schools and private schools located within a stone's throw of every single campus in our district. But for our older neighborhoods and campuses with lower enrollment, I know many parents don't feel like we are leveling up for them. I think they feel like we are giving up on them. I assure you that is not what they're doing, but I recognize completely the angst that parents feel. When deliberating the closure of schools, I know that everyone up here has weighed so many factors. We've listened to parents. We've thought about school safety. We've thought about everyone's kids at every one of these schools, and we've also thought about the financial predicament that we're in. I have considered these recommendations in front of me very carefully and thoughtfully. I've also very carefully considered what the SBAC has brought to me. I've spent much time asking questions and reviewing the data. Recently, there was also a comment made by a fellow trustee about being on TEA's radar. It is unfortunate, and it is a reality, that many superintendents and board members across the state worry about the threat of state takeover when working towards school improvement. And that's part of what we have been presented here. Working on school boundaries and closures, while that seems absolutely counterintuitive and counterproductive, I know that is what Dr. Smith is doing. Some of my votes tonight reflect that I know the burden that has been placed on me by the community, and my votes are based on the fact that I just simply cannot surrender my judgment based on this perceived threat of being on TEA's radar. But regardless of the votes that have already been taken and the votes about to be taken, I respect and support the full will of this board. I have a few additional remarks. I absolutely know the superintendent and his team, including but not limited to our teachers, our campus administrators, campus staff, and central office, have collaborated with much focus and effort to increase student achievement, to support academic growth, and to close learning gaps between student groups. Many of our students and campuses have made great learning strides over the past time with Dr. Smith's tenure. My concern with my votes and each and every school in my oversight capacity is that will the decisions that I make, the votes that I make, impair the superintendent's ability to ensure maximum student performance for all students. So I want to share something. I don't care if you read it right now, but I do agree with the fact of the kind of startling realization I came to when I looked at the data during the last board meeting. And, I confessed that I missed looking at some data that had gone out to the SBAC the SBEC, and it looked like this. It was huge, but it had some very startling and different numbers on some of the campuses. And what I just draw your attention to is, just for instance, in one item, let's say, for instance, 2029, following your eyes over, the most recent data we got from PASA last year showed us at 78,000 and a little bit over. Then the recent data coming from December, which I clearly missed, I think it was said it was presented in a January meeting, and I clearly missed that as well. So not until this weekend did I look, and I saw, I mean, y'all, that's a $9,000, not $9,000, 9,000 student drop. So I understand, Trustee Sharania, the information you brought to the table for us to consider, and I appreciate you looking at that, but I do understand the importance of thinking about the advisory committee and the work that they've done. And so I ask this board to think about this precipitous fall that is on the sheet I gave you that is directly from PASA. It came from this page, in case you guys want to know, and previous binders. I want us to really hold our superintendent accountable to provide us a long-range district plan of action that is far more than what was included in this long-range boundary proposition. So when we look to the middle schools, I really hope that we can have a more solid vision of what choice looks like, how we plan to recruit students, how we plan to retain students, because the numbers you see from PASA to me is very startling and concerning. With the Gibson audit, I think that staff might agree with me. And if you don't, I hope you speak up, but that the number of 5 to 7 million really came out of that cost savings audit. They actually recommended that we close 12, and their number was something like a cost savings of 14.6. Reading through it several times again, I could not find evidence that the cost savings report anywhere included where auditors considered the maintenance and operation cost for a closed facility. When a campus closes, it is my assumption that the roof will still need to be repaired if it leaks. The plumbing will still need to be addressed if it breaks. The building must still be monitored for security. The grass must still be mowed. So I'm very deeply concerned about the cost of upkeep of an empty building, and I'm deeply concerned about the viability of impacted neighborhoods that will have empty buildings sitting. So later tonight, and as part of what I'm asking the board to do, later tonight we have an agenda item that looks at some of our schools, one of which will be required to have a targeted improvement plan, and some will have a local improvement plan. I really ask this board to ask our superintendent to really look at our programming. I know this year we have been looking very carefully at our special education program to make sure those kids are getting what they need, getting their reviews, getting their ARDs in a timely way. But I ask also that we look very carefully at our early literacy centers, our pre-K kids, to make sure that our ELCs are doing what they are intended to do. Because I know 2 of the schools that we proposed to close, they did not have the benefit. And they're 2 of our very high-risk schools. They don't have pre-K programs. They send them to the ELCs. And I'm very This was very hard for me because I had no real clear answers on how those programs impacted not only academics, but also enrollment. So I'll just end by saying I value the work of the staff. I value the work of the SBAC. I know these decisions were difficult for them too. I recognize their efforts and time commitment. I also value the input from parents, teachers, students, and other community members. And if you didn't get a response from me in email this week, I simply got too overwhelmed. So whatever the outcome brings tonight, we've already seen some of it, I will hold the superintendent accountable to ensure all students are made to feel welcomed on their new campus and that the educational opportunities are rigorous, intentional, and appropriate for every single learner. I hope my fellow board members also do the same. I know changes will be challenging for many students, parents, families, also for our teachers and our staff members who support our learners. I appreciate the input from every single stakeholder, whether that was via survey, showing up here to speak directly to us in public comment, whether you found my phone number and texted me, whether you saw me when my cowboy hat was getting steamed at the hat store. Whoever you are and wherever you gave me feedback, I appreciate it. So again, no matter what your vote is tonight, I know you made it with deep contemplation. I respect that, and that is all I have. Thank you, Ms. Tassan, for allowing me that time.
Thank you, Ms. Hannah. Ms. Worsbicky.
I just wanted to say thank you to all the parents and stakeholders who sent countless emails and requests and did their own research. I have been, not for this particular issue, but I have been on in that seat fighting for what I thought was right, and I applaud you for doing so. Please don't give up on us. And I do trust the administration for what their recommendations. I wished I had a little more time to feel 100% more confident, and that was a bit of where my struggle was. As trustees, we must ground our decisions in our district's mission to prepare all students to achieve excellence in college, career, and life. And that mission requires us to weigh fiscal responsibility alongside the potential impact on student learning and long-term outcomes. While financial sustainability is important, it should not be the primary lens through which we evaluate decisions that affect thousands of students and families. I have questions, I have studies and research that I wanted to pull out tonight if I needed to, but I think we're past that. I appreciate all of the trustees, all the questions they've had, the thoughtful research on their own as well, because decisions of this magnitude affect so many affect people from the Northwest to the Southeast, as we've seen, and they affect academic outcomes, family stability, and community identity, which I think has been one of the hardest things for our community members, and I do empathize. While I recognize the financial and operational pressures facing the district are intense, I was not convinced that this plan was sufficiently balancing those pressures with the potential impacts on student outcomes. And that is why I made some of my votes tonight and will continue to, because of just, I think some parents even said it, we need to be 100% confident. This isn't a vote for $50,000 in some materials. This is a huge impact. For the last 7 years, I have driven my kids to their elementary school every day. So I do understand. And I hope that even if I disagree with some of the votes tonight, I know that I will continue to work to ensure Fort Bend ISD is a school district families choose, because that is what we're up against, choice. And I really hope that the families out there who are affected, because it's a lot of you, will continue to work with us on trying to make it the best district we can.
Thank you, Ms. Worsbicky. Ms. Helliger.
Thank you. I think I agree with everyone's sentiments tonight. I mean, this was very, very difficult. A lot of questions, a lot of conversations, even up until today, as I read some of the emails that came through, I wanted to verify. I'm just calling and verifying and checking, even to the last minute. Trustee Hannah, your comments, I agree with them. It's important that we have good programs. And so what you saw tonight from me was, these are my thought processes here around, because we want good programs, special education. I heard a lot of conversation around special education. And so when you have resources that are split, that concerns me. How can we truly have good, strong programs if we're not using our resources effectively and efficiently? And so that was really why you saw me vote the way I voted tonight, was because I want Fort Bend ISD to be a very strong district. And, I saw the news where Lamar ISD, I think it was Lamar ISD, right, our next door neighbor, was, launching a new early invention program. And I said, that needs to be us. That needs to be us with strong programs and putting the right resources there, utilizing our teachers to make a more efficient, effective school district, not just one that is spread thin. One of my also concerns is, because I want our kids to be well educated. I heard over the last several weeks, I'm concerned about my teacher. I'm concerned, my student has the best teacher. I want to make sure all of our kids in our district has the best teachers. And I know we do. We have great teachers, but it's hard when I'm asking questions about what's happening with our kids when you've got one or two teachers with a grade versus 3 or 4 with a grade. That makes it very, very hard for our campuses to succeed, our teachers to succeed. The bar keeps getting higher for education, as we all know, right? And how do we put ourselves in a position of strength for our kids to be successful, to compete in this big old wonderful world of ours? So that's where a lot of that. So ultimately, we want to be able to, for me, is set our children in Fort Bend ISD. Kristen Tyson and I go back and forth with some things sometimes. And one of the things, as I was processing this, I remember her saying, "You're not a representative, you are a trustee." And tonight, all 7 of us were trustees of this district. And so regardless if you liked one vote or not vote, just please know that we all, and I believe it wholeheartedly, voted what was best that we thought was for all of our kids in Fort Bend ISD. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Yeah, you want Dr. Gilliam? Go ahead.
Good evening, and I will be very, very brief. As my trustees were talking, all of us, my colleagues, I should say, all I could think of is Stephen Covey and 7 Habits of Leadership. And this has been probably 30 years ago where I studied it, and it's with me all the time. And it feels different because I didn't get the win-win, because we have things that we have to get done. We have to listen to different sides. So this was a tough day. It was a tough day. I know that thinking of you, Ms. Haliger, as what you just shared. You know, we want to do our best. And I know that when I walk out of here, I'm going to think, did I do my best? And I thank you all for your patience with us. I thank the Board of Trustees, everyone who took time. We took a lot of time doing this. Thank you all. From our employees to our superintendent to everyone in here, parents. I wish some things, I truly wish some things would have been a little bit different, but that's where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gilliam. Ms. Charania.
I echo the sentiments of all of my fellow trustees. I know this has been a hard day, hard decisions to make, and I know tomorrow we'll have harder decisions because we still have a deficit gap that we still need to close, and it's going to affect like the programming that we'll have to look at as well as other central admin. So today we're owning decisions that have been made by previous board members, and we're owning them. And as leaders, we're looking long-term and thinking strategically in the best interest of the entire district. And yeah, I mean, we are looking to course correct because we don't have the enrollment that we were built for. We have other pressures with TA. And yes, there will be economic consequences of families making other choices, but there will be longer lasting economic consequences of not doing anything either. So so thank you really to SBAC and to the admin and the community members, everyone who's reached out, everyone who's advocated. It's been tough, and thank you for your advocacy and thank you for your service. We're all in it for the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Charania. So in closing, I said most of what I wanted to say at the last board meeting and the impact that these decisions have on me personally and how I have lived them as well. And so I'll just reiterate that. For me, this decision, I don't know if you guys saw the Houston Chronicle article that came out last week, but the headline was Fort Bend ISD is among the largest enrollment declines in Houston. And that's what we're facing. And I think the green sheet that you gave us, Ms. Hannon, bears that out. And so what we are faced with is with that reality, which impacts the seats in the buildings, and it also impacts the dollars that come into the district. How are we going to maintain our improvement and our growth, our academic growth that Ms. Hannon talked about earlier? How are we going to sustain that? And that means making hard decisions. How are we going to compete? You know, we are in an age of choice, but I want to be families' choice regardless of what their options are out there. And how are we going to compete with LCISD that's opening their new autism program? I mean, how are we going to do that? We opened several years ago when Addie and I were on the board together previously, the Early Intervention Academy. How are we going to continue that academy, which is very expensive? How are we going to continue some of our really good reading academies, literacy centers? How are we going to continue some of our excellent bilingual programs or expand them? And the answer is, at the end of the day, if we don't do something, we're not. And that is just not something I could vote for. Having lived 26 years as of 2 weeks ago in the disability community with my daughter and in special ed specifically, I know how hard transitions are. I get it. I've lived it. I know it's hard. But at the end of the day, if we cannot offer programming that improves the lives and opportunities of our students in special education, then whether they have to transition or not will not matter. And I know because I've lived it. So this was a decision that I made, even knowing the challenges that some of our students are going to face, because I think the alternative is untenable. It's not something that we can do and say that we are giving high-quality education to every student. So that was my focus. It was funding, it was programming, it was declining enrollment, and it was how are we going to continue to grow our achievement in this district. And that's by recruiting and retaining high-quality teachers, retaining those that we have, and recruiting to fill spaces as they come available. And we have to be able to do that, whether it's through funding or programs or resources that our staff and our teachers need. And so that's what it came down to for me. And you're right, Ms. Helliger, we are trustees, and I feel like we're entrusted with the education of over 70,000 students. And my heart breaks for the 3,000 that are impacted by these changes, because I know it's emotional, but at the end of the day, we have to do what is best for the education of those children as well as the other 70,000 that we're entrusted with. The last thing I want to do is take the opportunity. There were lots of thanks given to the community, and I too sat on that side of the dais for many, many years, and I do appreciate the engagement of every family member who sent an email, who came and spoke, and who really engaged looking at data and otherwise. Every SBAC member, especially those of you who have emailed us over the past few weeks, I read them all, I promise. And I appreciate you guys digging in and challenging our thought processes and challenging the data and everything. I really did appreciate it. But I also want to take the opportunity to thank every trustee who has engaged and been thoughtful. And I agree and with the comments earlier. I respect each one of you and the hard decision. I mean, nobody really understands but us. And so, it's a hard decision, and everybody has to approach it from the position that they're coming from, and we all have to prioritize those decision points. And I appreciate the hard work of the trustees throughout this process. And finally, Dr. Smith, I want to thank you. I want to thank Beth. I want to thank Pyle. I want to thank Stephanie. Where is she? I want to thank you guys especially, because I know you've had sleepless nights. I know you've gone through every single question. I know you've gone through every single piece of data. I know it probably has impacted your health. I know that living and breathing this is extremely challenging, not just from a numbers perspective, but from an emotional perspective. I know many of you have served here for many, many years. This is your home, this is your community, and these are your schools. And so it is not lost on me, and I'm sure not these other trustees, how hard this has been for y'all. And I also want to thank the rest of the team, because I know every single one of you have had to give data and numbers and answers to questions from your own departments. And so thank you for being engaged and answering questions and giving us the time that we've needed to make this decision. And I'm with Ms. Hannon. This entire board's going to hold you all accountable. But what I know is I know your hearts, and I know your work ethic, and I know how much you care about the kids in this district. And my expectation is, and what I know is going to happen, is that y'all are going to make it work, and you're going to care about every single kid. And, I appreciate, Dr. Smith, the team that you've assembled, because I really do believe that you're the best team in the state of Texas. And I know if anybody can make this work, it's going to be you guys. And I'm really sorry that this is what you're facing. Because back in the day, we had growth so much that we didn't know where we were going to put the next school. And we're faced with the exact opposite. So I think you guys are here for such a time as this. And I appreciate that we have this team to work on this. And I hate that you have to do it this way. With that, I am going, did you want to say something? Go ahead, Dr. Smith.
Just want to say to the board, as well as the, excuse me, our parents and the team, how much I appreciate your commitment, and definitely understand the accountability and the charge that you've provided for me. And I'm just very passionate and confident that with you all collectively and with the team, we're going to embrace the challenge, and we're going to move forward with a great deal of passion to make sure our district not just survives through this process, but thrives through this process. And so I'm confident that we will meet that standard.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. All right, we are now going to vote on the remaining schools in the Northwest Central Elementary Attendance Boundary Plan, which includes Arizona Fleming and Mission West Elementary and the remaining boundaries. So a yes is to close the schools and accept the district's recommendation, and a no is to not close. Please vote. Motion fails 4-3. So that's Arizona Fleming and Mission West. So the motion was to accept the district's recommendation to close Arizona Fleming and Mission West. So the vote.
Sorry, I incorrectly voted. I'm sorry. I was.
No, we're not going to do that.
Sorry.
We're not going to do that. So, Mr. Brush,
Trustee could make a motion to reconsider the previous action. It would require a second and then
Okay.
a subsequent vote.
so if you'd like to make a motion to reconsider the previous action, and you'll have to get a second.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the previous action.
I second.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Ms. Charania and a second by Dr. Gilliam. Do we have discussion? And this is on the motion to reconsider. Ms. Charania, did you have any?
No. I
Okay.
don't.
So a yes means we will reconsider the previous motion. A no means that we will not reconsider the previous motion. So if you vote yes, we're going to go back to the previous motion and vote again. Does everyone understand? If you vote yes, then we will go back to the previous motion that we voted on and vote again. Does everyone understand? Okay. Motion passes 6-1. So we will now reconsider the motion that we previously voted on, which is for closing Arizona Fleming and Mission West Elementary. A yes closes the schools, a no keeps them open. Does everyone understand what they're voting on? Okay, please vote. Motion passes 4-3. All right, next up on our agenda are the information items. First is the Bond 2023 overview. Dr. Smith.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Kathleen Brown will lead the presentation.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Smith, Board of Trustees. This evening, we will be providing for you an update to the Bond 2023 program. Most of our presentations to you this year have been about Proposition A and have been on the part of our design and construction team. But tonight, we will provide an update for you from our IT department, which has items in Prop A related to technology infrastructure, as well as Prop B, which relates to student and staff devices. So our Executive Director of Information Technology Services, Mr. Chris Nielsen, will be bringing you that update this evening, followed by Mr. Nielsen. Mr. Brian Gwynn, our Chief Financial Officer, will provide a financial update related to the bond program, including the status of contingency funds. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Nielsen.
Good evening, President Tassan, Dr. Smith, and members of the board. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a brief update on the 2023 bond IT projects. As you know, the 2023 bond was organized into 3 propositions in accordance with state law. Both Propositions A and B contained IT-related projects. Proposition A contains IT infrastructure projects, things like our network, data center, servers, cybersecurity, and disaster recovery, while Proposition B contains all the technology that our staff and students use every day, desktops, laptops, iPads, and so on. Currently, we have completed 56% of the projects in Proposition A and 55% of the projects in Proposition B. At the end of this presentation, I'll give some details on projects planned for the next 6 months, which will bring Proposition A to 74% completion, and Proposition B to 93% completion. The largest IT infrastructure project within the 2023 Prop A bond is a complete network replacement. The industry standard for core network infrastructure is a 5 to 7 year replacement cycle. However, by maintaining strong partnership with our vendors and the work from our dedicated network engineering team, we've been able to adopt a 10-year network replacement cycle. Over the past 2 years, we have replaced the wireless network controllers, switches, the wide area and local area network equipment at all campuses, as well as more than 4,000 wireless access points at all middle and high schools, all of which were originally installed in 2015-16 as part of the 2014 bond package. As I mentioned at the beginning, Proposition B is dedicated to end-user devices, laptops, desktops, iPads, with 92% of the funds dedicated exclusively to student devices. One of the most visible and impactful projects was the 2024-25 transition of all secondary students, more than 44,000 6th through 12th graders, to one-to-one laptops with the Equipped program. Proposition B funded 45% of the cost of that program, with a federal grant covering 55% of the initial cost. Also, before the beginning of the 24-25 school year, all 2nd through 5th grade classroom laptop carts were increased by 66%. Over 15,000 additional elementary student laptops were deployed to give every elementary classroom laptop cart 20 computers. At the start of this school year, Proposition B funded a full refresh of the 7-year-old high school CTE engineering lab computers. This project recently completed with a replacement of 765 engineering workstations across all high schools. Additionally,